Welcome, Big Ten fans. This is Big Ten Ted Live. We are back on Wednesday night. Welcome, everybody, to Big Ten Ted Live. We got not one, not two, but three topics here today that we are going to talk about on the live program. Big Ten Ted Live here tonight. Before I get into the topics, what topics we are going to get to, because of course it's summer. It's summer in the Big Ten. It's summer in college football, so you know what that means. We've got conference realignment talk. We're going to get to that. But before we do, just want to send out a few big B1G, that is, a few big congratulations. First of all, Maryland taking home back-to-back baseball Big Ten tournament titles, and Penn State in the men's lacrosse Final Four as well. I believe that's this weekend, so good luck to the Nittany Lions out there to try to bring home the Big Ten, a men's lacrosse title. So what are we going to get into here tonight? The Cal and Stanford debate. Cal and Stanford, do they bring the value to the Big Ten? We've talked about Oregon. We've talked about Washington. There have been reports out there that say, hey, maybe CBS, maybe NBC is going to pay up. Some have reported that. Some have said, well, I'm not so sure quite yet on that front. But if that is the case, then where does the money come for Stanford and Cal? Where's the value for Stanford and Cal? Joel Klatt mentioned on his show, on his podcast, this week, he talked about contraction, right? The media dollars, the media value, it's going to cap out at some point, maybe in the future. So could contraction be a thing? So I think you got to be careful where you expand. I think that's something you got to keep an eye on, right? I'm going to have a video on that, by the way, Big Ten contraction. Could it happen in the future? That video will be dropping on Friday. So expansion, got to be careful, got to be strategic. That's where I'm at with Big Ten expansion. Big Ten presidents are going to love Stanford and Cal. And the academic prowess and the research prowess partnering with those schools in the Big Ten Academic Alliance, of course they would love that. You got basically Ivy League schools on the West Coast. So we'll get into that. There's a lot more to break down as we get into that. So that's segment one. Segment two, I love the roster of Big Ten quarterbacks this year. Big Ten quarterbacks are going to be very good. This is about as deep as maybe as our conference has maybe been so far. The fixing audio now. Thank you, Joey, for pointing that out. Thank you. But getting back to it, segment two will be Big Ten quarterbacks. The Big Ten quarterbacks. So we're going to get to that. They've been about as deep. The depth in this conference is going to be very good this year. At the top, you got guys like JJ and Talia Tungavailoa, but the meat of the quarterback depth in the middle of the league, I really like as well. So I'm going to talk about why I love this roster and the depth of Big Ten quarterbacks this season going into 2023. It's, like I said, it's as good as maybe it has ever been. Possibly. Or at least let's just say in recent memory. The quarterback depth. Love what they got coming in, especially some of the newcomers into the Big Ten at the quarterback position. And we all know how important the quarterback position is in the Big Ten Conference. And lastly, the news coming out today, we're going to be talking about the schedule, the TV schedule. A lot of big matchups, a lot of interesting, most of them were fairly not super surprising where some of these TV matchups ended up, but there's some key points that I want to take out of the TV schedule, really the September and kind of sprinklings of other TV games that are going to happen, times and networks that are going to happen throughout the season. So we're going to get into that as well. Little teaser for you. There was one that kind of surprised me. The Washington-Michigan State non-conference game, going to stream exclusively on Peacock. That kind of surprised me a little bit. But then later on in segment three, I'm going to say why, well, maybe that's not the most surprising thing in the world. So we're going to get to all that here as this show progresses here tonight. Thanks for tuning in to Big Ten Ted Live on a Wednesday night here tonight. You can be involved here tonight in the show. First of all, you can support our channel with a super chat, which just happened. Thank you, Joey. I'll shout you out here in just a minute. You can support the channel with a super chat. Click the $sign and leave your amount to have your comment highlighted as well. So you can do a super chat or just a regular chat, of course, as well. And you can call into the show 715-600-2150, 715-600-2150. Someone's going to call in. It's going to open the floodgates. It's going to be great. It's going to happen. It's going to catch. It's going to catch. Pretty confident in that. So if you want to talk about Cal and Stanford, you want to talk about expansion, you want to talk about the TV schedule. Did your team kind of maybe not get the spots you wanted? Maybe a lot of primetime games, afternoon games. Call in. We can talk about that here as this show progresses after kind of each segment, each talking point. I'll get through that here as the show progresses. But we've got a lot to get to here tonight. Sunshine Design is in the house talking about debate. Going to debate myself. And of course, when we talk about debate, call-ins, chats, we're going to go back and forth here tonight. Joey is here rocking the Penn State logo there. Let's go. Always great when we can talk Big Ten football in the summer. It is hot. It is getting up there into the mid-80s here in the heart of Big Ten country. So you know it is here. We are less than 90 days away until Nebraska takes on Minnesota. So everybody get pumped up. Joey, appreciate the super chat here tonight. Appreciate the support. So let's get into it. Let's talk first about the Cal and Stanford debate, because I've gone back and forth on Cal and Stanford. Okay, so first thing I want to mention about the Cardinal and the Golden Bears, something that I believe cannot really be debated, right? We're going to start off a debate with not really much of a debate. These schools are fantastic, amazing, spectacular when it comes to academics, when it comes to research. When it comes to that point of conference realignment, Cal and Stanford are as good as it gets. These are essentially Ivy League schools in the Power Five. Like, that is amazing where these schools are at. The academic standards that they have at Stanford and Cal are really high, and it really makes you appreciate the Jim Harbaugh era at Stanford and the David Shaw era at Stanford a little bit more when they were able to put that successful of a football team for around a decade plus on the field for that long. It's amazing that they were able to do that despite the academic standards that take place. So no one's doubting Cal and Stanford when it comes to an academic standpoint. When it comes to a research standpoint, they would really bolster the Big Ten Academic Alliance. Like, you got to think Big Ten presidents love the thought of Stanford and Cal adding to the prestige. When you talk about the prestige of the Big Ten Conference from an academic standpoint, there's no doubt Stanford and Cal are right there. That's the plus. When we talk about pros and we talk about cons, that's the pro. But then you got to start to get into some of the concerns. It's money. Money is the thing that I think is the primary driving factor of whether Stanford will or will not get a Big Ten invitation. I firmly believe that Stanford and Cal both want to be in the Big Ten, and that the Big Ten wants to get Stanford and Cal. I believe there is mutual interest. There were reports kind of going back to last year about this. They've really cooled off as of late. I believe the financial aspect is probably the biggest aspect that may prevent Stanford and Cal from joining the Big Ten. There have been reports about NBC and CBS possibly paying up a little bit more to get Oregon and Washington into the conference. Some have reported that, some saying, well, I'm not so sure as of yet, but that's been reported by some. It's been floated out there. It's been rumored that CBS and NBC, because of their later time slots, are the one that would pay up for the Ducks and the Huskies. But beyond that, you really think Fox, CBS, NBC are going to pay up for not only Oregon and Washington, but then you look at Stanford and you look at Cal. When you look at it from a network point of view, you look at big games, you look at games that are going to draw eyeballs, you look at games that are going to draw money. And here's the reality, because when you talk about, and I knew this coming in, when you talk about Stanford and when you talk about Cal, you can talk about academics, you can talk about research until you're cardinal and gold and blue in the face. But what this all comes down to, right, when we talk about value to the Big Ten, it's value to Fox, it's value to CBS, it's value to NBC. Where is the athletic value? Wait a minute. You might say, wait a minute, Ted. When you talk about athletic value, when you talk about that, you got to talk about Stanford. They've won the most national championships in all sports. And I understand that. Stanford is excellent at the Olympic sports. They are a great program, but when it comes to the revenue sports, they have dropped off. When it comes to a football point of view, I'm going to get to kind of their football and why they might need to evolve a lot to impress Petiti and others to get in to the Big Ten Conference. But this is more than just Olympic sports. If this was about academics and research and Olympic sports, this whole conversation might be a little bit different. But eventually, how much more money are you going to want to squeeze out right now? How much more money are the networks going to want to give in? Now, I understand, like I said before, I understand the positives that Stanford and Cal bring to the conference. And if it were up to me, and if in a perfect world, sure, I would love Stanford and Cal to be in the conference, adding to the prestige and all of that. But even when the Cardinal and even when the Golden Bears have been good, Cal for football, at least pretty consistent success, you got to go back to when Aaron Rodgers and then Marshawn Lynch was driving in golf carts. Like, that's where you got to go back to the mid-2000s to find consistent Cal success in the football field. For Stanford, it's a little bit more recent. But even in those very good periods for the Cardinal and for the Golden Bears, even in those periods where things were going really good, the fan support just wasn't there. These are teams that right now, when they're winning 3, 4, 5 games a year, that the fan support it's difficult. It's difficult to get fans into the stadium. The Pac-12 as a whole, as a conference, those Western schools struggle with attendance. And Cal and Stanford are at the bottom of a conference that struggles with attendance. Cal and UCLA was at the bottom as well in terms of the percentage of the stadium and percentage of the possibility that they were able to fill up. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's just, I don't know if the fan support is there at Cal and at Stanford. I think that's the big thing that I really look at. That you don't have really the fan support. You really don't have it from a football point of view right now. You need to be strategic. You need to hit big home runs every time. USC and UCLA was that home run. I firmly believe the Trojans and the Bruins added that value in many different ways. UCLA basketball, USC football, Los Angeles recruiting, all of that. I can see Oregon and Washington. I've said on this channel before, they don't pack a punch that USC and UCLA does, but they add some value on the athletic field, on the football field, and we know football drives the bus in terms of revenue and in terms of college sports. Let's talk about each school individually right now. Let's talk about each school. Let's talk first about Stanford, because when you take a look at the Cardinal, this is a program that needs to prove that they are willing to evolve with the times to get into a Power 2 league. Because when NIL got started, this was a program that had pretty consistent hesitance in terms of name, image, and likeness. It's not until recently, in the past year or so, that Stanford has really gotten things together on the NIL front with the Lifetime Cardinal Collective, which I believe Andrew Luck is a part of. Some people have said it's, quote, wildly frustrating, the NIL limitations that Stanford has put on. And you look at new head coach Troy Taylor. He says he's not crazy. He doesn't like the turnover. He's not hugely invested in the transfer portal. When you talk about things that are going to win going forward, I'm not saying you need to do a Deion Sanders flip every year, but you're going to go into the transfer portal and you're going to recruit. And I understand why it's maybe more difficult at a place like Stanford. I understand the academic limitations. You need to get kids, and this is what Troy Taylor has said, the new head coach of Stanford. You need to get kids that are academically strong, that's putting it lightly, academically strong, and athletically, you can develop them over time. I don't know if that's a model that can necessarily work in today's day and age of college football. It can work when you recruit like Ohio State does, like Michigan does. But when you're a Stanford, you're going to need, when you get good players, there was a good amount of players at Stanford this year transferred out of the program, right? You had, I believe, Drake Nugent. He transferred out and went to Michigan. He might be on the starting offensive line at Michigan, and we know how good Michigan was on the offensive line. There are players transferring out. When you have these veteran players transfer out of your program at Stanford, where are they going to go? Where are they going to go? I think that's the big question right now. Like this season, Stanford got 3 transfers. To put into perspective, 2 of them were Ivy League offensive linemen. Like that's putting it into perspective. And maybe this will work. Like now there are so many different ways to win in college football. Maybe this will work. They're trying to do it the Jim Harbaugh way, trying to identify players that are academically strong, athletically strong, and they're buying into Stanford and trying to evolve that way. You know, that maybe worked before NIL, before the transfer portal, when transferring was a lot more difficult. Now I think it's a different day and age of college football. I believe the Big Ten is on the cutting edge of some of these things, some of the NIL, as a conference. I know there's some schools that maybe lack in certain areas, but as a conference, when you talk about name, image, and likeness, when you talk about the transfer portal, I believe that a lot of Big Ten schools are on the cutting edge. I don't know if Stanford really fits into that, okay? So I don't know where they're at. They are going to have to evolve. And it all circles back to money. It all circles back to the financial part of this. See some people in the chat right now talking about late time slots, West Coast football. I think for Stanford and Cal, if they want to, we talked about the financial aspect. If networks don't want to pay up beyond Oregon and Washington, an extra time slot. We've talked about Big Ten After Dark on this channel. And I know some people staying up late, watching Big Ten After Dark games. I don't know where things are at right now, right? You've already got 3 Big Ten time slots. They're investing more into primetime games late in the season. That was a topic last week here on the show. Big Ten After Dark. I don't think you would ever get a full schedule of Big Ten After Dark. I think it would be sporadically, but that's maybe something. That's a time slot that you could possibly go after. Maybe you get a permanent carrier on a Friday night game. We've mentioned those time slots before on this channel. I just don't know at this point. I don't think that, because you know what you need? You need about $70 to $100 million just to get Stanford and Cal into the conference. I'm not talking about added benefits. I'm not talking about more money for other schools. I'm just talking about getting Stanford and Cal in and keeping everybody's payout the same, which that I don't think is a good strategy for the future. If teams come into the conference, I believe it has to increase the revenue for all schools involved. That's how I feel about Stanford and Cal. Let's move on to the Golden Bears. Let's move on to the California Golden Bears. Show me the money, because man, do they need it at Cal. According to Night Sports, they are reporting more than $440 million in athletic department debt. And yes, of course, Cal would love to go to the Big Ten. That would, even though they'd probably come in at a reduced share, $35 million, maybe $40 million every year. Eventually, you got to think that would chop down and chop down. Now, some things are beyond your control, like when an earthquake fault is underneath your stadium, and that's what they kind of needed to spend a bunch of money on at Cal. they needed to spend a lot of money on almost earthquake-proofing their stadium over there. So they spent a lot of money on that, spent a lot of money on other facilities. They're in debt by a lot right now, and obviously the Pac-12 revenue is not really there right now. We know all about the Pac-12 networks. We know all about the struggles revenue-wise, media deal-wise that the Pac-12 is going under right now. I almost view Cal as the little brother in this situation. I think Stanford, because of their success across a lot of other sports, and just because they have more partnerships with companies like Apple, they do research partnerships with Apple. I know Cal is involved in that as well, but that's the thing. That's another thing I think we need to talk about. LA is LA. Taking 2 schools from Los Angeles, fine. The Bay Area is a good market, but it's not Los Angeles. It's not Los Angeles, and I believe Cal is not Stanford. So the question you need to really talk about is, are there a couple of teams out there? Are there 2 teams worth grabbing in the Bay Area? Is it Cal and is it Stanford together? I think that's the thing that we need to talk about. Is it worth it? Is that something the Big Ten is willing to go after? I could see 1 school in the Bay Area. Now you add in 2, I think that's a different situation with Cal. And could their debt and the debt that they've gotten be a drawback as well? I think that's something to keep an eye on for the Golden Bears as well. I see positives and negatives for Stanford and Cal, but where I'm at is financially, I don't know if they bring the juice. I don't know where the money is going to come from. I could see Oregon and I could see Washington. Stanford and Cal, a little bit tougher to really justify that, I think, right now. So let's get to some of your comments. Here right now. Let's talk about this because I've gone back and forth on this. I kind of started with, I could see Stanford and Cal, but then you kind of look at the information a little bit more. You look at what's out there, and then you kind of think about it a little bit more. Let's start with Frank here. Hot take: get Stanford and Cal if it gets Notre Dame to join. Here's something that's been brought up by folks before. Grab Oregon, grab Washington, grab Stanford, and grab Notre Dame as a pair once that happens. That could possibly, if you pair Notre Dame with Stanford, now all of a sudden the value goes up. And that might not be for another 10, 15 years, right? More comments. Joey chiming in. Let's go south. Get Florida State and Miami. Go to Texas and get TCU and Baylor. Forget the left coast, says Joey. Florida, you got to think is on the radar. And when you look at Cal and Stanford and maybe the Big Ten's reluctance to extend an invitation, it will probably be because of their eyes on the state of Florida. It will probably be because their eyes are on the Sunshine State. They know they could possibly get both Miami and Florida State. And that's the thing. When you talk about expansion, it's great to continue to expand. It's great to continue to get increased value into the league. But you need to keep an eye on the future. You know the Big Ten wants to get into Florida. You know the Big Ten wants to get into Florida. You know they want to get in there. We have an update. We've got some news from our buddy, the Big Time Boiler. Zach Edey is back. I know today was the deadline for the NBA draft, but it looks like Zach Edey is back. Got a couple of players from Michigan State coming back on the basketball front as well. So thumbs up to you, Purdue. Hopefully the Zach Edey break coming back gets you out of the first round this time. All right, let's talk about Big Time Boiler also chiming in on the topic here today. Stanford and Cal about as appeasing as Rutgers and Maryland. It's tough. I just don't know. I want to believe in it. I want to believe in the prestige that it would bring and Stanford, what they bring from an Olympic sports point of view. But it's really hard to look at this from a football point of view and from a football-centric channel on the Big Ten Conference and really look at Stanford and Cal and think, yeah, that brings value. That's hard for me to say that. It's hard for me to say that. HD90 Dog, check it in. In my opinion, Oregon and Washington make sense. TV West Coast footprint extends across the entire West Coast. Cal and Stanford don't add much. Notre Dame and a Southern school rounded to 20, again, in my opinion. I've said before on this channel, you add Washington, you add Oregon, you have all of the top brands on the West Coast. Let's say Stanford, Cal, Washington State, Oregon State go independent. They join another conference. The majority of recruits aren't going to go to whatever conference they're in or independent. They're going to go to the Big Ten that has the Oregon, the Washington, the USC, the UCLA. The top players from the West Coast are going to go in there. I don't know if you need Stanford and Cal to say this is the West Coast. We talked about the West Coast being Big Ten country. You had Oregon, you had Washington. That might be enough. Big time boiler. Oregon, Washington, North Carolina, Notre Dame called it a day. However, Notre Dame will never come unless they're cornered. Yeah, and that day might be coming sooner than later, depending on what happens in these legal happenings in the ACC. I think that's going to depend a lot on that as well. It's going to be interesting to see how far do they go, because I've talked about a 22 and a 24 team conference before. But is that too much? Does that dilute the pot a little bit? Does that dilute it a little bit? Daniel Decker saying he's going to stay up to watch West Coast football. He's going to stay up. Travel partners, and that's why Oregon and Washington have been mentioned as well for travel partners' sake. I think Oregon and Washington help. I think if their goal is to go to a 24-team conference, maybe 4 divisions of 6 teams, that's where Stanford and Cal kind of come in. But here's the thing with Stanford and Cal. Here's what I think with the Cardinal and the Bears. If they don't come in right now in 2024 and the Pac-12, Colorado and Arizona go to the Big 12, Oregon and Washington go to the Big 10. There's 6 teams left, and the Pac-12 maybe stays alive with 6 other teams or 4 other teams or whatever from the Mountain West or whatever conference. SMU could be thrown in there as well. Stanford and Cal, their prestige, at least athletically, is going to take a drop, right? The Pac-12 now, it may not seem very valuable, but from a Stanford and Cal perspective, now you go now, I think you're more valuable now than you are in a couple of years, 4 or 5 years, when Boise State, San Diego State, SMU, UNLV, schools like that, and you're essentially a top G5 league. That's kind of where I stand with them, at least in terms of the timing as well with that. Let's see what else we got. Good comments here coming in. Daniel, I would rather get Arizona State, and then Stanford and Cal. Arizona is AAU. Of course, Arizona highly rumored right now to be headed with Colorado to the Big 12, and that could be happening sooner than later. By soon, I mean maybe this week? Maybe? I don't know. Tony chiming in. Cal and Stanford have no media value. Media partners pay for football and men's basketball. Their TV ratings are terrible. And I talked about their fan support as well with Cal and Stanford. Basically, it's a synopsis. They provide great academics. They provide great research and very good Olympic sports. Beyond that, where's it at with Stanford and Cal? You could maybe go markets. You could go Bay Area, but I don't know if the Bay Area, I don't know if that's big enough right now to really justify that. So there's Tony on that. Sunshine Design, I just don't tune in before 3 p.m. dinner times and after dinner games. Spend my Saturday nights. We're going to be talking about time slots and TV games. We're going to be breaking down some of those games here as this show progresses. Joey chiming in. I'd be shocked if any Big Ten program would give part of their $100 million for those teams. Here's what we all need to know. Nobody's sacrificing any more money. I've said that before. The only way we're getting more teams if it makes more monies for the current teams in the conference. Nobody taking a pay cut. Nobody's taking a pay cut. I can tell you that much. Mike saying, you know who brings the money? Nebraska brings the money. Nebraska sold out 93 plus thousand football. And then you got, for that women's volleyball night in Nebraska, where I believe they're going to take on Omaha. They broke records in all sports. Nebraska, according to Mike, brings the money. So that's kind of where we stand on Cal and Stanford. I've gone back and forth on this. I guess right now, as we sit, I know a lot can change. A lot can change in the Big Ten, and a lot can change in conference realignment, and it could start to change maybe this week, maybe the week after. But when I look at Stanford and Cal, I just don't think that they bring the money, they don't bring the financial value right now to really boost the Big Ten up really that much. So that's where I'm at on Cal and Stanford. Thanks everybody for coming along for the ride today. Coming along for the ride. Mike Mechanics chiming in. Oregon, Washington, Notre Dame, North Carolina, Florida State, Miami, Georgia Tech are serious additions of the Big Wants. It will be 24 teams in the end. Big Ten wants the Northwest and the Southwest. Bank it. Take it to the bank, says Mike. I've said this before on this channel. They need to have a big home run moves. Those are the moves that need to be made. Okay? I don't see Stanford and Cal as a home run move. I just don't. Oregon and Washington, I'd even say Oregon and Washington, I don't know if I see that as a home run move. Okay? That's kind of where I'm at with the Ducks and with the Huskies. I don't know if that's a home run. I don't think it's a home run move right now. I just don't think it's right there. I don't see it. I don't see Oregon and I don't see Washington right now as that home run move that's really going to make a difference. Maybe it is. Maybe Oregon and Washington will get there. Maybe Stanford and Cal eventually. But who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Some good realignment talk here to kick things off, to kind of get your primer going with Stanford and with Cal. All right, let's move on to segment number 2. Let's move on to the second segment of the show. We're going to talk about quarterback play, folks. We're going to talk about on the field. We are less than 90 days until we're back. Less than 90 days until Nebraska faces Minnesota in Minneapolis on August, 31st? August 31st, I think. Football is coming back. Football is coming back here right now. So we're going to talk about quarterbacks in our conference. And man, I really love what this conference has from a quarterback perspective. I am a big-time fan because at the top of the league, you have your returners. You have your guys like a J.J. McCarthy. You have your guys like a Taulia Tagovailoa. You have those type of guys at the top of the league in terms of returning quarterbacks. Now, I know some new quarterbacks could kind of get in there and they could kind of make their presence known and they could have better seasons. You look at your new guys like a Kyle McCord and a Drew Allar that have 5-star potential, 5-star rankings next to their name coming out of high school, but how are they going to fare in their new offenses? When I take a look at the depth of this conference at the position, this is possibly one of the deepest quarterback classes we've had, at least in recent memory. That's the way I see it. Because when you look at beyond J.J. McCarthy, beyond Taulia Tagovailoa, I think where I'm most impressed at the quarterback position is the gut of it, is the middle of the league. Because, yeah, you have good quarterbacks at the top. There's no question about that. You have very good quarterbacks at the top of this conference. And you're going to have new guys that are going to be in that upper echelon in terms of players that are at the top of this league. But it's your Ethan Kaliakmanis, it's your Jeff Sims, it's your Luke Altmaier, it's your Hudson Card, it's your Taven Jackson, it's your Ben Bryant even at Northwestern, the Cincinnati transfer. There's a lot of girth there in the middle of this conference. There's a lot in the middle there. Look, I'm just going to go down one by one by one, and we're going to talk about each one of these guys, what I really like about each one of these guys, and then in the end I'll kind of say why I feel that this class of Big Ten quarterbacks might be one of the deepest that we've seen in some time. Let's first talk about Ethan Kaliak-Manis, quarterback at the University of Minnesota. When I look at Ethan Kaliak-Manis, I think it was really tough for him starting last season in that game against Penn State. I think that was very difficult for him. Whiteout game, I mean, it's not going to be easy for anybody going into that situation. I don't care how young or how old you are at the college level. But what I saw from Ethan Kaliak-Manis, I really saw him improve as time went by. He really improved, like that last game against Wisconsin, going down the field, connecting with LeMahieu Brockington into the end zone to give the Gophers the axe once again. Now you bring back Chris Autman-Bell, you bring back Brevin Spann-Ford. Then you throw in transfers Elijah Spencer, which he looked like established a very good relationship with him in spring ball. Okay, and then you take a look at Corey Crooms as well. This is a wide receiver room that's very deep. I think it's going to make Ethan Kaliak-Manis better. There's also something to be said for having a full spring and a full fall camp as the starting quarterback, which Ethan Kaliak-Manis did not have, of course, because Tanner Morgan was the guy in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I really like Ethan. Minnesota's one of those teams right now. Minnesota is one of those teams to watch out for. If their defense can just be a Joe Rossi defense, if it can be a good defense, this is a Minnesota team. Not by any means saying, hey, Minnesota's going to win the West. I picked them to win the West last year. Came a little bit short. When I look at Minnesota, they are a team that can maybe surprise some people. They're a team that could maybe do some things. And Ethan Kaliak-Manis is at the center of that. He's at the center of that. Next up, let's talk about Jeff Sims, Nebraska quarterback, Georgia Tech transfer. This guy, you look at all of the quarterbacks in the conference, he might be the best dual threat type of guy. He adds a lot in this dual threat quarterback run game. And I have a feeling that Nebraska is really going to utilize that. I've said this before on this channel, that Jeff Sims at quarterback really reminds me a lot of P.J. Walker and when P.J. Walker was at Temple, when Matt Rule was the coach at Temple. Tall, lanky kid, can throw the ball pretty well, but also can be involved a lot in the quarterback run game. And I believe Jeff Sims is going to be a guy that's going to do well. I think there's still a good amount of unknown about Nebraska right now. I think there's still a lot that still hangs in the air, I think, right now when it comes to the Cornhuskers. But what I really believe is that he's going to make a difference in the running game, and he's going to be, I don't know by how much, but I don't know, he might be an upgrade over Casey Thompson at quarterback. Definitely in the run game, even though Casey was pretty good at creating things with his legs. But in terms of a middle-of-the-road Big Ten quarterback, this is you're looking pretty good, Big Ten, with your quarterback depth when a guy like Jeff Sims sits right there. Let's talk about Luke Altmaier at Illinois. When I look at Altmaier, when I look at Luke, quarterback of the Orange and Blue, he looks a lot like Tommy DeVito. Of course, he was the quarterback at Illinois last season. I think he might be a little bit better than Tommy. I watched some film this year. I was watching back the Purdue-Illinois game from last season. I know there was some weather involved. But there were some throws where I wasn't super thrilled about Tommy. I think Luke Altmaier could come in and be a difference maker. 4-star guy, transfer from Ole Miss. I think the talent is there for him to succeed. And they've got a wide receiver group coming back that's not too bad either. Like, I believe there's going to be depth at the Big Ten quarterback position because of maybe some of these weapons on these teams, like in Illinois, like in Minnesota, and even like in Nebraska and other teams like that. Like, they've built their offenses up for their quarterbacks to succeed. Hudson Card at Purdue. Good reports. High marks coming out of spring ball for the Texas transfer Hudson Card, who is now the quarterback at Purdue. This is a guy going into a system, Graham Harrell, offensive coordinator at Purdue. This is a Purdue team that's known for kind of throwing the ball around a little bit more. And Hudson Card has shown some things at Texas. Now, he didn't show enough to be the permanent starting quarterback at Texas. You know, when you got guys like a Quinn Ewers and an Arch Manning coming in, that can happen. But when I look at when I look at the Texas transfer Hudson Card, I see good things. And when I look at Card, I don't think he's going to be higher than a middle-of-the-road quarterback in the Big Ten. But once again, we're talking about the depth of the conference as a whole. When Hudson Card is the 7, 8, 9 range, I think you're sitting pretty good for the Purdue Boilermakers. Taven Jackson at Indiana. He's another guy, another transfer coming into this season. He is another transfer that could make it happen again. 4-star guy from a crowded Tennessee quarterback room, and they've got some weapons over there at Indiana. Taven Jackson, I think, is a guy that could surprise. You look at Ben Bryant from Cincinnati, who had some successful seasons with the Bearcats, especially last season. Had a good season last year at Cincinnati. He comes into Northwestern, and maybe he could do some things. Like, the only guy or guys that could maybe be average, below average, poor is maybe Gavin Wimsatt at Rutgers. Right? You kind of threw him in, you took him out. You threw him in, you took him out last season at Rutgers. And now the turnover is there where I just don't know is he their guy? Is he the guy that they're going to completely invest in at Rutgers? Maybe Taven Jackson would be possibly into that role. Who knows if he's going to start yet? That hasn't been completely determined. But if you look at guys, I think at the top of the Big Ten in terms of quarterbacks this season, you're going to see J.J. McCarthy. You're going to see Talia Tagovailoa. Love him. I think you're going to see, I don't know if Tanner Mordecai at Wisconsin is maybe going to be as high as I originally thought. Deeper dives. Maybe didn't play as well against some of the tougher competition at SMU when he was there. I don't know about Tanner Mordecai. He has, and this offense has the potential to be really good. It also has the potential to maybe not be great. Braylon Allen is going to be depend a lot in terms of to see how Wisconsin does this season. But I look at this conference as a whole, look at the flag behind me. There are very few bad quarterback situations in the Big Ten Conference. Now, we could maybe see things develop as we go along. We know that's the life and times of a Big Ten football season. But when I look at the quarterback depth in this conference right now, I see some really good things. I look at the top, as I was saying before, JJ. I look at Talia. I think Kyle McCord and Drew Allar are going to be up there as well. I think those two guys are going to be above Tanner Mordecai probably for most of the season. I think Tanner Mordecai might slide into a high tier 2 type of guy. McCord and Allar maybe a low tier 1 type of guy in terms of Big Ten quarterback rankings as well. I wanted to say this about the conference as well. I believe that the Pac-12 is probably the best conference in terms of quarterbacks this year. You look at DJU going to Oregon State. You look at Bo Nix at Oregon. You look at Caleb Williams. Maybe Dante Moore is going to play at UCLA. There's Cam Rising is back at Utah. We'll see how Shedeur Sanders does at Colorado. They've got a very deep quarterback conference, but I think the Big Ten is right there. I think you can argue that maybe the Big Ten is possibly better than the Southeastern Conference right now. I think the SEC is maybe taking a little bit of a step down at the quarterback position. And the Big Ten, when you see guys like Talia, when you see guys like JJ, Drew Allar, Kyle McCord, the numbers that they're going to put up with the weapons that they have, I see the Big Ten and see it panning out pretty darn well for the Big Ten Conference. Let's get into some chats. Why don't we? Eric also chimed in. Eric, a resident Hawkeye fan, that say Oregon and Washington aren't home runs either. I said that a while ago, and recently I've come around because of the rumor going out that says CBS and NBC are willing to kind of pay more for them. So maybe the value is there. But I would agree in saying that Oregon and Washington is not the value. It's not the value that USC and UCLA is. Tony, a little bit hesitant on Georgia Tech as well, the Yellow Jackets, about the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Right? If Stanford and Cal aren't additions the Big Ten shouldn't pursue, then they probably shouldn't pursue Georgia Tech either. Georgia Tech's got a good market, like the Bay Area out in California. They're both academically strong. I think Georgia Tech, comparing them to Stanford and Cal, in the same type of ballpark, in the same type of conversation. Same type of conversation. Sunshine Design thinks Stanford and Notre Dame is the home run. The more I kind of think about this and the more I break it down, is maybe Oregon and Washington now hold the phone a little bit. Maybe Notre Dame will be ready at some point, but Notre Dame plays ball with the Big Ten. The Big Ten doesn't play ball with Notre Dame. That's the way I want to see it happen with the Fighting Irish. But a combination of Stanford and Notre Dame could be a great pair. I just don't know if Stanford and Cal is the pair. Our boy Big Ten Johnny, number one guy. When we talk about the Athan Kaliakmanis fan club, number one guy standing in that line is this guy, our buddy Big Ten Johnny. No, I'm just kidding. Not a big fan. We went back and forth. We went back and forth on Athan Kaliakmanis last season. Back and forth on Athan. Let's take a look here. More comments coming in. From Joey, will Drew Allard be the quarterback that had him ranked number one and number one recruit in the country? He has, like Penn State can be a playoff team. Penn State can be a Big Ten championship team. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that they can be a championship team. I think they've got the pieces on defense. Now, they might not be as good as Michigan in some spots. They might not be as good as Ohio State in some spots. But I believe right now Penn State is in a great situation. And it really depends on the quarterback play. Drew Allard coming in. I believe he might be the most talented guy at the quarterback position to step in as a recruit at Penn State. Or maybe I should say it this way. Maybe the most hyped guy at the quarterback position that's coming at Penn State. I know they've had good quarterbacks over the years, the Darryl Clarks, the Trace McSorleys, the Kerry Collins. I know they've had good quarterbacks, Sean Cliffords. But when I look at talent coming in and hype and recruit, Drew Allard might be at the top of that list, maybe the most expectations that a Penn State quarterback has ever had. There are a ton of expectations. Ton of expectations. Erica not sold on Stanford. Not sold on Stanford. They maybe bring everything except a big punch on the football field or the basketball court. A lot of people here not completely sold with Stanford. Really appreciate everybody for coming by here tonight on Big Ten TED Live. We're getting to our last segment of the show. And I feel that this might be our best segment of the show. Might be the one that might be the most interesting because it is news. It is news that happened here today. We got TV assignments, ladies and gentlemen, and now we can really see it. We can really see it down the pike. There are games right now that we can see when they're going to be at, which television network they're going to be on. And there are some storylines that I want to take from these schedule announcements that we saw today. So let's dive right into it. I first want to start with the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Spotlight's on you, Matt Rule. Spotlight's on you, Nebraska. Nebraska starts on the road on a Thursday night at Minnesota, 8 Eastern on Fox. They're getting the Penn State-Purdue treatment from last season. They're getting that treatment that the Nittany Lions and the Boilermakers got Thursday night under the lights to open up the season. Fox pregame show on site. You're probably going to see Gus and Joel out there. A lot of storylines for Minnesota and Nebraska, a Big Ten game to kick off the season. The very next week, Nebraska plays in the big noon Saturday game, the big noon kickoff game at Colorado. Also, I want to say this. That is a big noon Saturday game, and that's in Colorado. So, 10 a.m. kickoff in Boulder? That should be interesting. We know the Husker fans are going to travel. We know there's going to be some red in the crowd. How much black and gold is there going to be in the crowd? That's an early wake-up. Get your early morning hike in. Get your hike through the mountains in. Head over to Boulder. Head over to Folsom Field. We'll see how much come in for that game against Colorado. But that is going to be a very fun week to the second game of the year where Nebraska visits Colorado, big noon on Fox. So the spotlight is going to be on the Huskers early in this season. They are going to have the spotlight. Can Matt Rule get through those first two road games with at least one win? I believe he's going to get through those first two road games with one win. I believe he's going to win one, and I believe he's going to lose one. As I'm sitting in this chair right now, I say he loses to Minnesota, comes back, goes up in the mountains, and beats their old Big 8 rival and knocks off the Colorado Buffaloes. That's where I stand right now. Although it would not surprise me in the slightest. It would not surprise me to see Nebraska lose to Colorado as well. It would not surprise me to see 0-2. It'd be a little bit of a surprise, but I don't know if it'd be a huge surprise to see them go 2-0. I could see 2-0. I could see 1-1. I could see 0-2. Where is this Nebraska team? Their spring game didn't really give off a positive vibe for me. But I think they have pieces that they can put on the field and that can make them a good team. It just might take them a little bit. They might get better later in the season as players continue to gel and adjustments are made. But the spotlight is going to be on Nebraska early on this season. I want to talk about Penn State as well because they've got, early in the season, they've got back-to-back interesting games. Week number 3, Penn State plays at Illinois. So Penn State at Illinois. That's a big noon Saturday game on Fox. I know Illinois at some parts during the season last year. At some points during the season, Illinois kind of struggled with ticket sales, kind of struggled with some things to get people into the stadium. A noon kickoff, I know Penn State's a big opponent. And the last time they played them in Happy Valley, 7-8 overtimes where Illinois was able to win that game when it came down to 2-point conversions. Can Illinois pack the stadium? Can they create a raucous atmosphere in a big noon atmosphere against Penn State? Because the very next week, Penn State has to play home in CBS in primetime, the whiteout against Iowa. Those are two tough games. Those are two tough defenses. Now, I know one of the games at home. If they were both on the road, boy, that would be a big-time ask, I believe. But having one of them at home, having the Iowa game at home, I think is a little bit helpful. But that offensive line, those running backs, that offense is going to have a tough time. Those are two really, really good front sevens. Right now, for my money, they might be the two of the top front sevens in the Big Ten. I know Ohio State is very good on the defensive line also as well. But they're really good, man. They are really good. We're going to find out, especially in that big noon Saturday game on Fox. Penn State at Illinois. We're going to find out, I think, what kind of quarterback Drew Allar is going up against that kind of team. We're going to find out. We're going to find out a lot, in my opinion. Let's take a look at some other games kind of early in the season. I'm really looking forward. Is it week number 3 here? No, not week number 3. Is it week number 4? It's week number 4. You've got competing primetime games. You've got Ohio State taking on Notre Dame in primetime on NBC. You've got the CBS game, Iowa, and Penn State, both in a primetime slot, both at 7:30 Eastern time on CBS and NBC respectively. That's going to be a fun evening of channel flipping. Even though I'm not a huge channel flipper per se, there was a time last year. It was the weekend where the weather was really bad, right? Where you had the monsoon in Madison. We had the windy game between Ohio State and Northwestern. I think it was at Purdue and Iowa. I think was that weekend as well. I believe firmly that this is going to be a great week. Iowa, Penn State, Ohio State, Notre Dame. Those are going to be two big matchups. I will say this. I watched 3 games at a time. I might watch 2 games at a time. You know I'm going to be side-by-siding the Ohio State, Notre Dame, Iowa, Penn State. They're likely going to have reaction videos of both of those games here when it comes back down to it. So I love what week 4. You kind of look at the other part of week number 4. Not a lot of other great games. You got Wisconsin and Purdue, FS1 on a Friday night, which is a sneaky game there for the Badgers early in the season. Rutgers at Michigan. Maryland and Michigan State is a solid game. That's kind of a little bit of a toss-up, at least for me right now. Minnesota is at Northwestern out there in week number 4. I think you got to go as well. We had an announcement for the last week of the season. Iowa at Nebraska will be noon Eastern on CBS. Of course, you got the Penn State, Michigan State in prime time on Black Friday as well. We know Ohio State and Michigan is going to be the big noon game. It will probably be the big noon game for the rest of eternity on Thanksgiving Saturday. But Iowa, Nebraska getting a little bit of an upgrade, right? That's been on the Big Ten Network the last few years, and it's going over to CBS. So that's a great thing for that Iowa-Nebraska game. I think that's going to be a fun game this year. It's going to be a fun game. I don't know how close it's going to be. I don't know what the score is going to be. I don't know any of that. But I think it's going to be a fun game. That Iowa-Nebraska, they hate each other. They hate each other. People from Iowa don't like people from Nebraska. People from Nebraska don't like people from Iowa. That has turned to when Nebraska joined the conference. We were talking about where the rivalry is going to come from, right? Nebraska, they played Iowa a handful of times in the past. They'd played Minnesota a little bit before, but this Nebraska-Iowa has definitely turned into a big rivalry for both schools. And now that Nebraska finally got a win in recent memory here, finally that Nebraska was able to break through against the Hawkeyes, now you got some back and forth, because that's when you really get good rivalries, when you have a back and forth. That's why I really thought Michigan and Michigan State for a while. Now Michigan seems to have kind of taken over, even though Michigan State won a couple of years back. They've kind of gone back and forth the last few years. That's why I really liked Michigan and Michigan State for a while. It had a fair amount of back and forth. Not saying every other year you get someone winning, someone one or the other winning, but I like the back and forth instead of, where Wisconsin won 14 or 15 straight against Minnesota before the Gophers finally beat them. And I believe that was 2018. It's just things like that. It's things like that. So I like to see that back and forth from a rivalry standpoint. And Nebraska has found Iowa as a rival. I don't think it's quite caught on with Wisconsin quite yet. Minnesota, I don't know. Iowa, from an Iowa perspective, of course, you've got the Floyd of Rosedale. I would say Iowa, Minnesota is probably still the rivalry for the Hawkeyes. And then I think you're battling. Iowa, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin. I know, though, the Heartland Trophy, the battle for the Bull, it's been a rivalry. And I know a lot of times it determines who's going to have a successful year, maybe who's going to make the trip to Indianapolis. Maybe Iowa, Nebraska has leapfrogged Iowa, Wisconsin. Maybe. I'm not saying positively yet, but I think it's worth discussing it. I think it's worth a possible debate over that right now. We've got some very interesting games, man. It gets you really excited for the season. It gets you really hyped up and ready to go. Ohio State taking on Indiana in week number 1 as well. Sleepy Bloomington, Indiana. They brought in some weapons this year. quarterback that can maybe make a difference? We'll see. We'll see. Maybe Ohio State and Indiana could possibly have something happen over there. And here's kind of the weird one. Well, there are two more weird ones I want to talk about. Two more weird ones. We're going to play college football on a Sunday afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think is this the week September 3rd, maybe the week before the NFL starts? That's what I'm guessing, right, since it's on CBS. We got Northwestern battling Rutgers. Now, I know the Big Ten haters are going to come in and say, well, this is what CBS, instead of having the SEC game, this is what you're going to get. This is what you're going to get, Northwestern and Rutgers. I will say this, it's a little bit of a meh game to start off with. On CBS outside of Ohio State and Indiana beforehand. But I like focusing on a Big Ten versus Big Ten matchup early in the schedule. Hopefully it turns out to be a good game on CBS, and maybe putting it on a Sunday helps it stand alone a little bit with maybe not as good of a teams playing and matching up in those matchups. Here's kind of one thing that I want to talk about as well. There's a game in, I believe, week number 4. I'm pulling up my schedule here. Just a minute. Where's week number 3? I'm trying to find which week that is. It's week number 3. Week number 3. Washington at Michigan State. Pretty decent matchup, right? Pretty decent matchup. You got Michael Penix. Could be dark horse, Heisman candidate possibly. Washington could be a good team. Washington was a good team last season. And then you get Michigan State. Now, of course, they've taken some hits this season, losing Peyton Thorne, losing Keon Coleman. But this is still a pretty solid game. It is going to be a Peacock exclusive game. A Peacock exclusive game between Washington and Michigan State. Here's kind of my thoughts on this. Love to hear your thoughts in the chat regarding Washington and regarding Michigan State. Regarding Washington and Michigan State. When we first found out it was going to be 8 exclusive games on Peacock, streaming on Peacock for the conference, streaming on the Big Ten, I think a lot of people thought, well, they're going to get subpar games. They're going to get games that, maybe not a lot of people will watch. Like Penn State and Delaware is a Peacock exclusive game. But you got to throw them a bone every now and then. And I think this is a game where you have a lot of maybe road games, like a non-conference game, Big Ten team on the road, so they don't really hold a ton of the rights right there. You have Washington and Michigan State exclusively on Peacock. This is throwing them some value. This is throwing them a bone, so to speak. So Peacock gets a game that maybe a good amount of people will watch. And maybe this is a primer for Washington to see what they can provide maybe down the road, maybe for the Huskies and the Spartans. That could possibly be something for them, for Washington and for Michigan State over there live on. And it's kind of a weird time, 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern time as well over there in that game. That's the same week of Penn State, Illinois, plays that week as well. Minnesota, North Carolina will be on ESPN or ESPN2. Louisville and Indiana play on Big Ten Network from Lucas Oil Stadium. Lucas Oil Stadium over there. Yeah, you got a Peacock exclusive Delaware and Penn State. That's week number 2. Iowa and Iowa State is on Fox. That's in a 3:30 window Eastern time. We'll see if the Hawkeyes can avenge last year's loss to the Cyclones. Wisconsin at Washington State is on ABC in primetime. Let's get to some comments regarding this. From Chris, Cal and Stanford raise their noise of the football programs, empty stadiums. That's been another tough part. It's hard to draw. It's hard to draw at a place like Cal and Stanford. I think for the majority of their time, they haven't been a great. Stanford's been good at times, but overall, they haven't really been a great program, so to speak. So maybe it's historic. Who knows? John chiming in, a close 0-2 is the one-score curse still at Nebraska. They got rid of that when they brought Frank Solich back to the spring game. They got rid of that when he came back to the spring game. But we'll see. I could, it would not surprise me, John, to see 28-24 to Minnesota and then 31-27 or something to Colorado. And then all of a sudden, oh boy, the curse has carried over. Here we go. We're oh so close, but yet so far away. We'll see what happens. Chris saying Mike Penix, Caleb Williams. Like I said, you got DJ Uiagalelei at Oregon State, Bo Nix. Yeah, the Big Ten I don't think is quite as good as the Pac-12 right now. But they are deep, they are good, but I think the Pac-12 is slightly better. HD90 Dog going back to quarterback talk. Hawkeye Nation has been absolutely buzzing since the transfer of McNamara. Add Caleb Brown, and the expectations are quite high. For some reason, I forgot to mention Cade McNamara. I apologize on that. Cade, I put out a poll that said, who do you think is the best quarterback in the Big Ten Conference coming back this season? Cade McNamara was pretty high on the list. Cade has all the tools. Can bad luck Brian Ferentz put him in a position? I just want to see Iowa get past these first couple of games. We were talking about the schedule. They start off with Utah State. Start off with a bang. That first game against the Aggies of Utah State, I want to see Iowa rack up some points. I want to see Iowa gain some confidence. Because in week number 2, Iowa plays Iowa State. And I really want to see Iowa. They laid an egg last year in this game at Kinnick. Iowa State has lost some guys, has lost some of their better players from last season. I want to see Iowa really burst onto the scene and come onto the scene. And that's a big game for me. If they can get past Iowa State with a good offensive performance, that is a big key right there. They could really build. Cade McNamara, offensive line is going to be a big thing. If this offensive line can protect him, I think he fits into this offense very nicely. I've said that before on here. Our buddy John chiming in. Always entertaining comments. Thanks for being here tonight. He's a big Michigan fan. Go Blue. Mike is going to be watching Penn State and Iowa. Boy, I tell you what, back-to-back games against Illinois and Iowa. If Penn State suffers a loss in one of those, I think it's going to be. I hate to call someone on their playoff hopes so early. I generally don't like to do that. But if they lose to one of those with Michigan and Ohio State still on the schedule, that's going to be tough. I think that's going to be tough right now. Erica, talking about Iowa season expectations. Do you think anything less than 10 wins for Iowa is disappointing given our transfer portal additions and our schedule? Let's talk about the Iowa Hawkeyes for a minute. Let's talk about Iowa. Iowa has to play Penn State, and we know, look at the flag behind me. They got to play one of these ways. They got to play every team in the Big Ten West. Right now, they might be better than every team in the Big Ten West. Got to play Penn State in a crossover. The more time that goes by, I feel more confident about the Iowa Hawkeyes possibly coming in and making a big-time difference. I think Iowa right now, I don't want to get too confident, but I've been warming up more about the Iowa Hawkeyes, maybe cooling off a little bit on Wisconsin. As this offseason goes, you can say, like, I can come out in February, I can come out in March and say, whoa, Wisconsin is looking good. Then you watch their spring game and it's like, well, now Iowa looks a little bit better. So things have some ebbs and flows throughout the offseason. And then we get to preview magazine time. We get to late July. We get to August. That's when you really got to dial in. That's when you really got to say, this is what we're thinking. CBS Rutgers and Northwestern, a big LOL from Badger and Bournemouth fan. I know it may not seem like the biggest, the most marquee game right off the bat. But I just want to say this. I want to say it's important for the Big Ten to get teams other than Ohio State, other than Michigan, other than Penn State, etc. It's important to get other teams on national television, CBS, NBC, and Fox, and this is a way to try to make that happen. Try to make that happen. That game is on a Sunday. It is on a Sunday. More comments here. HD90 Dog. Washington MSU should be a good time. Good game. Not sure how I feel about the Peacock exclusive coverage. Cutting the cord is starting to cost me more money than traditional coverage with streaming. A lot of streaming services really racking up. So how does it compare? YouTube TV recently raised their rates. I'm feeling that, and now you've got Peacock exclusive streaming as well involved in this. I think that's where things, a lot of people say, I'm not going to watch this game or I'm not going to watch that game. I've said before on this channel, Peacock needs to try to get in their own window on a Friday night. Doesn't happen. It looks like FS1 has that Friday night corner. I think they did the Friday night game last year between Illinois and Indiana. They've got a couple this season. They've got Nebraska and Illinois, FS1 Friday night. Wisconsin-Purdue is an FS1 game on a Friday night. So maybe if it's not Friday night, they might get buried not being in a cable television or a streaming television channel flipping type of deal. Maybe they can get to those that way at some point. But that's why I said this before. You need to throw them a value bone every once in a while. And I feel like that's what the Big Ten is doing that by putting the game like Washington and Michigan State on Peacock. Mark Samuelson. Stanford will absolutely not lower standards for the graduate programs. If you scan the other rosters for Duke Vandy, they both have well over a dozen graduate students on their rosters, which makes some of the seasons with Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw all that more impressive with the success that they had. It is difficult. It is difficult from an admissions point of view to really get in there. Anna chiming in here. Penn State, West Virginia kicking off Big Ten Saturday night on NBC. Can't wait to see that game. I've been talking about Penn State and their first real test is taking on Illinois. West Virginia, I think their over-under was, 4.5 maybe for a win total. I want to see Penn State come out at night, under the lights, Beaver Stadium, set the tone for the season. Don't play around because maybe they might play around and this could be a close game against a Power 5 team. Set the tone, really establish who you are early in the season. Talk about Cade McNamara. There's some talk about Cade McNamara going back and forth. Let's get into that, why don't we? Erica, because we got back-to-back comments really with opposite opinions of Cade McNamara, which I think is interesting. A lot of people are overlooking Cade and our team. Iowa does well as an underdog generally, so I think it will work out. When you don't expect Iowa to maybe be great, that's when they end up being great. I'll say this about Cade McNamara. He fits. Assuming the offensive line checks out and is better this season, because I think that's where maybe Cade McNamara could get into trouble. If he's under pressure a lot in this offense, if Cade McNamara struggles, because when he was back there at Michigan, he had all kinds of time behind a Joe Moore winning offensive line. It's that offensive line. If they can keep him clean, so to speak, lost my train of thought there a little bit. If they can keep Cade McNamara clean, they got the tight ends, right? With the short passing game that really Cade McNamara is going to be good at. I think Caleb Brown, I see him, maybe I know he can get deep. I know he's got the speed to get deep, but maybe short passing game, create after the catch kind of thing. You need to play into Cade McNamara's strengths. As a talent, where does he stack up with other quarterbacks in the Big Ten? Maybe middle of the road, upper middle of the road, maybe. But that's why Brian Ferentz's job is so important this season. You need to set up Cade. You need to know what type of talent Cade is. You need to run the ball with Caleb Johnson. You need to do all this stuff. You need to play into his strengths. That's what you need to do. All right, let's go on to the other side of the coin. From Blue Dove PDX, Ted, Cade doesn't have all the tools. Mobility not great, not a thrunner, not dual threat. So we established doesn't have the legs, which I will not argue with that. That's why you need a good offensive line. And if you have him running for his life, I don't think it's going to end up great. I'll say Cade is more of a pocket passer. I think he fits into this scheme. Like, he's a lot better than the statue that was Spencer Petras. When Spencer Petras was on the run, you almost cringed and said, don't get hurt. And then eventually he did get hurt against Nebraska. But I will take a lot of people over Spencer Petras in terms of in terms of overall quarterback play. But I think Cade McNamara is an upgrade. But yes, you need to keep him clean in the pocket. You don't need a great offense. Iowa needs an average offense. With what they have on defense, they need an average offense. More about Stanford. Stanford is arguably the best school in the country. They're an Ivy League school, said that at the top of the show. Ivy League school in the Power 5. However, a free master's degree from Duke or Vanderbilt, a ton of NIL money, and access to their alums sounds like a good deal to me. They have been hesitant, said that in segment 1. It's taken them a while to get onto NIL. Transfer portal. It's tough at Stanford. I don't know. I think that somebody said before, I forgot who it was, but I think the combination of them and Notre Dame could possibly be something that helps. Badger and Bournemouth fan making a bold prediction. Wisconsin will beat Iowa at Camp Randall Stadium. When we're talking about TV, we're talking about kickoff times, we're talking about all that stuff. I want to see what time I want to see what network. This is going to be a big game, folks. Middle of the season, I want to say off the top of my head, it is before Wisconsin's matchup against Ohio State. So I really want to see this game and see where this one ends up. Because this is going to be a big game. This Wisconsin-Iowa game, even though it's maybe not in November, not towards the end of the year, this could determine who takes home the Big Ten West title and represents the West Division in Indianapolis. Johnny chiming in. Peacock, YouTube TV, getting ridiculous. Thursday night on Amazon. I don't want all the subscriptions. If anybody knows about TV, it's Big Ten Johnny. YouTube TV is just another way to watch ESPN, FS1, all that stuff. But they're getting involved with NFL Sunday Ticket as well. I could see more things streaming on YouTube. I think MLB, Major League Baseball, has a game of the week. You talk about streaming and maybe the unwillingness to adapt. Like, look at Major League Baseball. Let's see if I can remember all these. They have Apple TV Plus weekly on a Friday night. They've got the Sunday leadoff, or is that a Saturday leadoff? Live on Peacock exclusive. They have a YouTube exclusive every week. They've got a lot of stuff in a lot of different places. Some people not a big fan of it. I don't know how it's done in terms of progressing the game of baseball per se. Maybe the pitch clock has done more than maybe streaming, but that's something that's happened. Tony chiming in. I agree Rutgers and Northwestern on national TV is good for the conference. Good for the conference. And that's going to be a big game for Rutgers and Northwestern. If one of these teams, I don't think right now that either of these teams is going to be a bowl team, but if they want to be a bowl team, this is a must win. I hate to say must win in week number 1 of the season, but it's almost that way for Rutgers and Northwestern if they want to get to bowl eligibility. Erica Goldberg. There it is. They do it on purpose. You want to get everybody in the spotlight. You want to get people on streaming. You want to get people on linear. That's where you want to get it. That's where you're talking about with Washington and Michigan State. Very curious to see what kind of numbers this game pulls, how many people tune into this game, because there's still more Peacock games to be announced. But as of right now, that's kind of the only really big game, so to speak, that's been revealed for Peacock. All sorts of good comments here tonight. Really appreciate everybody for jumping on the live stream here tonight. Good stuff. We've got our TV schedule coming out, which means that it's time. It's getting there, folks. We are closing in on football. We are closing in. Badger and Bournemouth fan says Iowa can't run the ball. We'll see. Caleb Johnson emerged in the second half of last season as their number one running back. Can he do it again? I think that's going to be the big question. That's going to be the big question. Here right now. Yeah. So some very, very good, some funny. I'll give you this one. I'll take pinkies up. Pinkies up for Hawkeye football. That's funny. That got me. I got to give you credit for that one. This will be an interesting point. The Big Ten needs some love from College Game Day this season. So, where is ESPN going to go? Because the Big Ten is no longer on ESPN. Usually, College Game Day, they like to invest and hype up a matchup that is on their network. That is no longer the case for ESPN. How many more times are they going to go? Is Big Noon Kickoff going to become a bigger deal, knowing that's going to be a primary destination for the Big Ten Conference? Very interesting to see how the College Game Day dynamic will work out in the future. Tony chiming in, why do people always have Notre Dame and Stanford coming to the Big Ten together? Well, they have that rivalry over the years that they've played. They've played a yearly contest for a long time. I think that's a big reason, is because of that. And I think for what we're talking about right now, when we talk about Oregon and Washington coming as a pair, I think what we've talked about on this live stream here tonight is that we generally, as a BTT nation, I think we generally believe, and what we've established is maybe Stanford and Cal as a pair don't pack the punch, but then you add Notre Dame and you tie them with what Stanford provides. Maybe that's the pair to possibly give some additional value to the Big Ten. HD90 Dog, Cade McNamara doesn't have to be Heisman caliber. Definitely agree with that. Iowa will have a strong defense, strong special teams. That's a given. The offense just can't be in the cellar any longer. Let's go back to last season. I'm going to try to pull up 2022 Iowa schedule here. There were a few games that really stick out to me where if their offense isn't putrid, if their offense is average, those games flip. Let's talk about it. Iowa State, a 10-7 loss. If their offense isn't terrible, they win that game. They start the season 4-0. Michigan, I still don't think they're winning that Michigan game. Illinois, they lost 9-6. You put an average offense on the field, you give yourself a shot to win against Illinois. Not saying they do. They're probably not beating Ohio State, and then Nebraska, hard to say. But I think you definitely flip Illinois and you definitely flip Iowa State if this is at least a 70th, 80th ranked offense in the country. You lose to Michigan, you lose to Ohio State, and maybe you lose to Nebraska. That's 3 games. You're 9-3, a whole lot different than 7-5. And who knows, if you're able to beat Nebraska, you go to 10-2. I believe a big thing for me was putting a lot more pressure on the defense. When you have an offense that was that bad, the defense is out on the field that much longer. Like you saw it in the Ohio State game. They were forcing turnovers early, and eventually the dam broke, and they couldn't just hold on anymore. George Seeley chiming in. Stanford has more NCAA titles than any other school. We touched on that here in segment 1. Stanford definitely helped the Big Ten in non-football sports. That cannot be disputed. That point cannot be argued. What can be argued is what drives the bus of realignment. Football does. Revenue sports do. That's a lot of what matters in conference realignment. You can be the best volleyball, men's soccer, and women lacrosse teams on the planet. You can have a 10-year dynasty. But if you don't move the needle on the football field, what are the networks going to... Are they going to pony up the extra cash to get you in? Are they going to provide value? Or are you going to put more money in the pocket of the other presidents in the conference? Jared Jones, friend of the channel, chiming in here. I like the Big Ten slowly getting into streaming. Peacock is a great partner. Slowly is the key there. There was reports that came out recently that said originally it was Fox, it was CBS, and Amazon was going to be the primetime partner for the old B1G. But presidents wanted to be on linear for that type of game. So they went with NBC, which I believe was the right decision. I hope this Fox, CBS, NBC lineup continues for many years to come. Because I believe the linear and streaming relationship, I believe linear is going to be, your best games are still going to be on linear. I don't care how far into the future. Over-the-air TV is still going to be the most popular television, but streaming is a great complement. That's why presidents and that's why things in the Pac-12 have kind of gone the way they are, because you're looking at Apple TV, you're looking at other streamers as possibly having primary rights, tier 1 rights. You're putting your best game of the week on streaming. So streaming's great. I like streaming, but I don't think it's a tier 1 type of platform. I think you got to go linear for that when you talk about a college conference or a sports league. Good stuff tonight. This last deal. This last segment, very good comments. I like the discussion. All very good stuff. Oh, Badger and Bournemouth fan, you are speaking to a personal situation. 7 MLB teams will be losing their TV channel tomorrow. I work in the television production industry doing some replay for Bally Sports in this area. That's something that has been going on across the country. The San Diego Padres are going to local or MLB television, right? The Bally Sports, Diamond Sports, they have increasingly regional television. We don't really have to worry about it from a college football standpoint, but from a TV standpoint, it's just one more thing that's happening. Everything in sports is going more national. And I'm feeling that. It sounds like here in Minnesota, we're going to stick with Bally Sports in theory throughout the remainder of the season, but a lot of things up in the air in terms of regional television. A lot of things up in the air. Richard Nelson, why do people think Oregon's coming to the Big Ten? There has been mutual interest reported that the Big Ten to Oregon and Washington, they've been, according to Brett McMurphy, they've been vetted and cleared for membership. Of course, what's going on in the Pac-12, a lot of uncertainty going on out west in terms of the TV deal, and those are two bigger brands over there that could join the Big Ten. We've said before on this channel, maybe they don't pack the punch that USC and UCLA did. I think they're a tier down, but they're still above what Stanford and Cal could offer as well. Travel partners as well. Not having so many games for USC and UCLA in other time zones, having games at Oregon and Washington. Just a couple of reasons why maybe people are thinking Oregon to the Big Ten. Rutgers and Northwestern. Watch this game be. Thank you for the super chat, Erica, by the way. Thank you for the support. Watch this game be like an outstanding game, right? When we almost like the Nebraska Northwestern game last season. Watch this game be a great game between two not great teams, and maybe it's a sleepy Sunday afternoon where the NFL hasn't started yet. I don't think it's started yet. Why? Otherwise, why would they put a game on CBS in the mid-afternoon on a Sunday? But watch Rutgers and Northwestern just be a banger of a game. Watch it just be last-second field goal, defensive touchdowns, big plays. Watch that happen. Watch that happen. Jared Jones, this is the worst year for the Big Ten game schedule. A lot of out-of-conference games on the road. It won't be like this next year and beyond. Yeah, this is one, especially I mentioned that week where you've got, well, I guess Washington, Michigan State is in East Lansing, but Minnesota goes to North Carolina, Ohio State goes to Notre Dame. Even though that's kind of be the quasi-Big Ten Saturday night as well, it looks like that season. Or that, so that week, excuse me. Yeah, it's going to be tough. But, with when you have these home and homes kind of going back and forth, I think it's going to turn out for the Big Ten eventually. Tony's thinking College Game Day is not coming to a Big Ten school. Look, I'm not saying they're never going to come to a Big Ten school again. I think that would be pretty rare, but I think they're going to be a lot more selective. I think they're going to be a lot more selective because you're going to invest into your product and you're going to have the Fox pregame show. Look, College Game Day is still, I was a College Game Day guy growing up through and through. I love the show. I will always love the show. But here are kind of my thoughts on the show right now. And I'm going to try to be as nice as possible. I don't know how successful I'm going to be, but I'm going to try to be as nice as possible. All right. Lee Corso's got to get off TV. I'm sorry. He's got to get off television. He has contributed so much to the sport, and he has done so much for the sport of college football. That guy's a Hall of Famer. That guy is awesome. He is the John Madden of college football. He's had people fall in love with this sport many times over. But his best days are behind him, and it's getting difficult right now to watch Lee Corso on television. And I just don't think College Game Day as a whole is the program it used to be. I find myself watching Big Noon Kickoff and Big Noon Saturday a lot more. Hell, maybe it's because of, hey, look at the name of the channel, look where I'm at. I watch Big Ten Tailgate and Big Ten Network a good amount as well. I think that's a very informative show as well, where the biggest Big Ten Network game of the week is as well. I love Mike Hall and what we have. I know Mike Hall's on the show. I love Rick Pizzo as well as part of the Big Ten Network crew. And there you go, Badger and Bournemouth fan. Stop watching ESPN if you want Big Ten content. That's the beauty of it. We got it right here on this channel. We got Big Ten content. We're not affiliated with ESPN. I'm not affiliated with ESPN. Fox, CBS, NBC. We're going to be talking about this in the video. I think that's dropping tomorrow, where I say, should the SEC and the Big Ten work together? They are totally split now. There's no more crossover between the SEC and the Big Ten. It's a good thing. The Big Ten is going to be the number one college promotion priority for CBS, for NBC, right? ESPN was putting in a lot more promotion and a lot more eggs into the SEC basket as of late. So this is a good thing. This is a good thing, being on Fox, CBS, and NBC. What I want to see down the road when the college football playoff rights are up in 2026, I want to see Fox, I want to see CBS, maybe NBC be involved in the television rights for the college football playoff, especially if we split it between Fox and ESPN. That's fine. Just no longer a monopoly when it comes to the playoff. I think that's a little bit of a conflict of interest the way things are going. Hey, someone do me a favor and smash that like button. Love it. Thank you for that. HD90 Dog. Yeah, I don't see Game Day wanting to go to the Big Ten. Big Noon has eclipsed them. Yeah, we're all on the same page here, man. We're going in the same direction. Some Iowa and Wisconsin fans might not like this next analogy. We are all rowing together on this one. Well, maybe not so much anymore with that Minnesota reference, but you get the general idea. A Big Noon Saturday. I just think there's more information, better analysis. I think there's better talent. I look at it, from my day job. I look at it from a TV production standpoint, and I prefer the production. You take the mascot head situation out of it, which of course is the buildup for College Game Day. You take that out of it. You look at it from a purely analytical standpoint, breaking down games. I believe Big Noon Saturday is great. I like their host better. Give me Rob Stone over Reese Davis. Give me the analysts. Give me the chemistry on set better for Big Noon or Big Noon Kickoff as opposed to Big Noon Kickoff as opposed to College Game Day. Ah, there we go. This is how things change, ladies and gentlemen. Not watching a single game on ESPN or ABC. So by that, I'm going to say Jared Jones will not be watching a couple of games this season. So for all you fans in the chat, just know Jared Jones is not watching Wisconsin and Washington State. Also not watching Minnesota and North Carolina. So by that statement, that's what we get. Here's the reality of the situation. As long as we have non-conference games against other Power 5 teams, we're going to have to watch ESPN at some point in time. Like that's the way it's going to have to be. But once we get into conference, it's going to be all about the Fox, the CBS, the NBC partners. All good stuff here tonight. All good stuff here tonight. Here's Tony. This is why I kind of hesitated. If you notice, I kind of hesitated on rivalry. Notre Dame and Stanford have only played 36 times. That's not many games by college football rivalry standards. You look at Notre Dame and Michigan as well. Those seem like pretty big rivals, and they played a handful of times before, I want to say, the 90s? Is what I believe it was. And I'm going to look it up right now just to confirm my facts. And we'll see here. So between 1887, here's some history lesson for you. 1887 and 1943, Notre Dame and Michigan played 11 times, and they really started in 1978. So from a college football rivalry standpoint, not huge. It's more than Notre Dame and Stanford, though. More than Notre Dame and Stanford. Of course, you look at the academic ties of the prestige of Notre Dame and Stanford as well, and maybe they're grouped together that way. Here's Erica chiming in. Amazon would have better than Peacock. I think more people have Amazon than Peacock. The great thing about, I have Peacock sitting at, $5 a month for the plan with commercials, and I like Peacock. Amazon is something that, everybody gets their shipping, right? Actually, I say everybody except for me. I don't have Amazon. I canceled Amazon like a year ago because we weren't doing as much online shopping. But a lot of people got Amazon. But that was supposed to be, I will say this, the original thought was Amazon was going to be in that primetime slot instead of NBC. I prefer NBC instead of Amazon. I talked about this before. I would love to see Amazon in a Friday night time slot because you have Thursday night NFL, big time promotion for the very next night, Friday night. That's what I would like to see. I'm not a huge fan of Friday night because I work on Friday nights in the fall, but having Amazon Prime Video for live Big Ten Friday night, I think that could be beneficial for a lot of people involved. Badger and Bournemouth fan. There is a reason half the teams in the pack said they won't sign up for streaming only. You can get buried. You can get buried when you're in that type of situation. Heads could roll here pretty soon, folks. And we're really going to find out what's going to happen really out west. But I've said this before. I think streaming is a great complement. I don't think it's a great primary, at least not yet. At least not yet. At least not yet. Big Ten Johnny, Ted, do you think the streaming services could offer discounts to students discounts to students whose games they carry? Now we're thinking creatively. Most of the services offer some kind of student pricing, but this is a big ploy for services. In theory, John would know this because he works with me on high school sports broadcasts. You're taken away from the gate. We need students at the game. That's the first thought that popped into my head. Maybe it's, who knows? I don't know if that's number one on the minds of everybody right now, but I'll give it a maybe right now. Dallas Schwartz, Game Day, has already said they're going to be at the USC game this year. Got to wait one more year to be a Big Ten member. Even though I'm like half there, I may be doing some USC previews and reactions this season. Just kind of get and UCLA as well. That would be the USC was going to be at at a USC game this season. Maybe USC Notre Dame. That could be a huge game. But hey, that's on our turf. That's on NBC, even though it's a Notre Dame game. Still on NBC. Still on NBC. Badger and Bournemouth fan says you're going to watch games live on ESPN. So I am Big Ten through and through. I've been Big Ten through and through for the better part of 20 years. And I've watched Big Ten football more than any other football. Okay, so I'll watch the games, of course, on ESPN. But I will, like last year, last year I watched very little football outside of the Big Ten. I remember the game I did watch. I was putting up Christmas lights. God, very odd this sticks into my memory. We're putting up Christmas lights, watching Tennessee and South Carolina. There were no, because it was a November game, or it would have been late in the season, putting up Christmas lights. I remember Tennessee and South Carolina. Remember that shootout where South Carolina was able to beat Tennessee? I think Hendon Hooker got hurt. Spencer Rattler had a great game. Nebraska fans are going to love that because Marcus Satterfield was the offensive coordinator at South Carolina, now coming over to Nebraska. Yeah, when that was like one of the very few. I don't know if I watched another non-Big Ten game last season. Oh, I know what it is. USC UCLA. I watched that game as well. That might have been the same day. Or maybe I want to say that was the same day. For some reason I want to say that was the same night. I don't know why. And a Big Ten tailgate is awesome. If you haven't checked it out, Big Ten Network, right? Saturday morning show. But it's on the site of the BTN game that week, the biggest BTN game of that week. Very informative program for maybe a game that's not the highest there. We're good, everybody. Tim Prangley, host of Trojan Conquest, in the house tonight. Hello to Big Ten Ted and Erica Goldberg, and hopefully a few others as well. We got the community with us tonight. Erica Goldberg, everything I think of Stanford, I think of how they hate fun. The first thing I think of when I think of Stanford, other than that ugly tree, is their band is not even a band. It's like their band wears like t-shirts. They don't even have a fight song. From what I understand, they play the song All Right Now by the band Free as their touchdown song. That's how it used to be. I don't know if it's that way anymore, but their band is kind of weird and quirky. It's just Stanford is just, yeah, it's like, we know, they invest in their academics. They care about their school. Football maybe isn't a huge priority. Now there's marketing. Put that on Amazon Prime. Friday Night High School Football with Big Ten Johnny. Fox must have known USC was coming to the Big Ten before it was announced, having Reggie and Matt there as USC royalty makes Big Noon the best show in town. SC will run crying Ryan in khaki pants off to the NFL. I like the nicknames. But yeah, USC, man, I'm going to love 2024 is going to be such a different year in college football. It's going to be a ton of fun, going to be a lot of fun in college football, but it's going to be very different. I mean, USC, I can't wait till that 2024 schedule comes out because USC, you're going to see some big time games. For Fox and whoever. Yeah. Mike chiming in. I'm so glad CBS this is not accurate. Fox is actually covering the Nebraska and Colorado game. It's Big Noon. Sanders on ESPN. That's all they're talking about at ESPN. What's going to happen at ESPN? Everybody throw on your tinfoil hats because it's conspiracy theory time. Colorado has been rumored to join the Big 12. The Big 12 has a TV deal with ESPN and with Fox. Deion Sanders has said he wants to get Colorado into Texas. I believe, and ESPN, they broadcasted the Colorado spring game. They've been talking a lot about Deion Sanders. And he's going to be kind of one of these new talking points for ESPN. What if ESPN, Deion Sanders, Colorado are working together to get Colorado back and keep Colorado on ESPN because of Deion Sanders? And that would mean getting Colorado to the Big 12 so they can remain on ESPN. And maybe ESPN thinks a Deion Sanders-led Colorado team is important to the future, is important to ESPN to keep the Buffaloes on the conference or on the network, which means bringing them to the Big 12. Bringing them to the Big 12. So, tinfoil hats. There you go. Jared Jones, Big Noon, greater than college game day. I agree 1,000 times over. 1,000 times over. Tim chiming in, probably USC at Oregon for game day. Yeah, or not Oregon, Washington, UW. USC versus Washington for game day. That's going to be a big primetime matchup. That's going to be a big matchup there for the Trojans and the Huskies. Have not checked the schedules for those teams quite yet, though, this season. Last year, games on the Big Ten networks were on BTN with YouTube. Now a new service to pay for Peacock. It's a part of it. It's just additional games. It's additional games and with, I think, going to USC and UCLA, going to the one. Now that's another thing about expansion. When you add more teams, you got to add more time slots and more networks to air all these games. Unless Big Ten Network wants to air 4 or 5 games a week, and I'm not sure if they have the infrastructure for that right now. So that's where you need to bring in the Peacocks and some of the other streamers to make that happen. Jared Jones watched every USC UCLA game last year except for when they were on the Pac Network. Holy boy, there have been a lot of factors that have led to realignment in one way or another. Boy, the Pac-12 network/networks have been that. Man, it is not good. Like their exposure is next to nothing if you don't live in the West. And I think that's been a big problem for what's happened in the Pac-12 is the Pac-12 networks. Longhorn Network has led to a lot of stuff as well. I have heard briefly, thank you for the super chat, Eric. Have you heard about Marco Lainez, I believe is how one of Iowa's quarterback commits? Yes, I have heard about Marco, the quarterback in the system. When Cade kind of moves on, I think, what do they got? Is that Deacon Hill, their backup, I think, right now? I can't remember. Had a couple of guys obviously transfer out of the program this year at the quarterback position, but I have heard of Marco. Got to do a little bit of a deep dive. Now with these next couple of months before previews come out, I can start to do some recruiting kind of research for kids coming into the program and kids maybe from the class of 2024 and all of that stuff over there. So I have heard of that. We'll see, right? New athletic director coming into Iowa. Probably not. If this athletic director is a decent athletic director, probably not going to tolerate this nepotism stuff they got going on. This Brian Ferentz, Kirk Ferentz deal they got going on. Could have maybe a changing of the guard in future, and we'll see if Marco, maybe they can get the most out of Marco over there. Tim chiming in. I'm curious about Tim's point of view here, hosting the show that he does. And from what I've seen with USC and UCLA fans is that they don't really care that much leaving. We're not sad about the rivalries we're leaving behind kind of a thing. Many of the people in the band don't even play an instrument. They just run around. Yeah, I've seen so many things about the band in terms of Stanford. It's just, when you go to these big games, like you go to a Rose Bowl, it's prestige. The band, the halftime performance is such a big part of it. It's such a big part of college football, not even the Rose Bowl, just regular games. You got kids running around, and then of course, you can't talk about the Stanford band without talking about the play, without talking about all the laterals. The band is out on the field. It feeds into everything. That always makes me laugh about Stanford. Oh, yes. Good stuff. Tony, I wonder if CBS will change their TV crew after this year. The older guys, maybe some new blood. Right now I'm going to answer your question, then I'm going to go in and kind of branch off a little bit. Brad Nessler, always love Brad Nessler. Gary Danielson, even though he's a Purdue guy, cradle of quarterbacks. New blood. I think they're going to stay. I think Gary's an institute. I think Gary's kind of an institution at this point. Brad is there. I think it's a pretty good broadcast team. Keep Brad. I could go for a change at the analyst type of spot at CBS. But I want to know who's covering, like when CBS has a SEC game and a Big Ten game, I want to know who's covering the Big Ten game. That has not been announced to my knowledge as of yet, who the broadcast team is going to be for the secondary crew at CBS. They've had sometimes 2 SEC games during the week, and they've had a secondary crew. I couldn't tell you who that second crew is and who those announcers are, but I'd like to know. Like, you've got fresh blood. You look at Noah Eagle, who's going to be very young, the son of Ian Eagle, great broadcaster as well. He's going to be calling with Todd Blackledge and Catherine Tappan, going to be calling Big Ten Saturday night on NBC. More comments. Does Ohio State play Iowa next year? All we know right now is the 2023 schedule. So, and as of, I don't think Iowa plays Ohio State. Did they play Ohio State this year? I can't remember if they play Ohio State this year. I don't know because they played them last year. I don't think Iowa plays Ohio State. I can't remember. I don't think they do. Got to get all these schedules in my head, though. Got to get all these schedules in my head. Erica, Stanford is quirky, and I'm here for it. They're like that awkward, geeky cousin or maybe the black sheep of the family. Yeah, that could be. I mean, are we talking ourselves into Stanford? Is that what we're doing right now? We started off the show talking about, well, I don't know about Stanford and Cal. Maybe we only need one geeky cousin. Maybe 2, that's a little much. That's a little much. We can only handle one, and maybe Stanford is the one. We got the geeky cousin in Stanford. We've got the stuck up, think they're better than everybody cousin in Notre Dame, maybe coming together. Who knows? Who knows how that'll work out? Some great analogies. Dallas Schwartz chiming in. Ted, that's me. I see the Four Corners schools going to the Big 12, or the Little 12, as he's calling it here in Oregon and Washington, the Big 10 as a remainder of the WAC 10. Boy, Dallas, I love your vocabulary here. I'm loving it. Includes and ends up at the Mountain West. Okay, so here's where I'm sitting, and it looks like we're going to have some stuff possibly happening soon. You know things are going to be happening on a specific day when our boy Greggy Flukar schedules a live stream in advance. You know things are working and maybe things are churning, so watch out that for tomorrow over there. But here's the way I feel things will happen. I think Colorado's going to go first. I think Arizona's going to go second. I think both of those are going to go to the Big 12. I think the Big 12 halts for now. And then the reactionary move is Oregon and Washington. It was reported before, or the Big Ten doesn't want to be the team, the conference that raids the Pac-12, so to speak, and kills them. So they're going to wait for Colorado and Arizona to maybe make their move to the Big 12. You get Oregon and Washington go to the Big 10, which means that conference is now down to 6 teams. And then I think this is where things get fun, because we talked about value before. Is the Big 10 going to? Is the Big 12 going to put 2 teams in Utah? Are they going to bring in Utah? Another team in Arizona? Are they going to bring in Arizona State? If the Big 12 doesn't want them, then what? I think the Pac-12 has got to they're going to get reactionary. They're going to try to get San Diego State and SMU, and you got to get 2 to 4 other schools probably to try to piece together a conference. But when those 4 schools, Colorado, Arizona to the Big 12, Oregon and Washington to the Big 10, though that's where things have been pushing. Beyond that, I think that's where things are up in the air. If you get Utah, if you get Arizona State to complete the Four Corners move to the Big 12, now you're talking about implosion in the Pac-12. Now you're talking about Washington State and Oregon State to the Mountain West. And I think then we sit in a point where maybe Stanford and Cal go independent in football. If the Big Ten doesn't want them, go independent in football and join maybe something like the West Coast Conference that doesn't support football, right? They've got Gonzaga and St. Mary's on the basketball point of view. The travel is a little bit less. Maybe that's something that could possibly work for Stanford and Cal. Jared Jones, Ohio State fan. We don't play Iowa enough, and I hate it. There was a series, I think it was Ohio State and Iowa, where they really it could have been Michigan, but I'm pretty sure it was Ohio State, where things got delayed, things got pushed back and rescheduled. They had them on COVID and they didn't play for a really big chunk of time. Really big chunk of time. More stuff. More comments. Some very good ones here tonight. Tim, really stating the obvious. Really stating the obvious. The Big Ten killed the Pac when they took USC and UCLA. Like, the Pac as we know it is dead, but the Pac as a whole, as it exists as a maybe it'll still exist, right? The Big East still exists. The Big East was raided, and that still exists. So there's that as well over there. So maybe the Pac-12, like you get, like even if it goes down to those four, if it gets down to Washington State, if it gets down to Oregon State, Stanford and Cal, maybe there's something that could be scooped together. I believe the Big 12 is going, and that's why I maybe cooled off a little bit on Utah and Arizona State right now to the Big 12. Gonzaga's been mentioned. UConn's been mentioned. All of those schools have been mentioned right now. They're trying to build a big-time basketball conference. UConn, Kansas, Gonzaga, Baylor. Really good basketball conference right now. Really good basketball conference. Let's get to some more comments. Sunshine Design had a weird dream. It was Iowa 63 to Iowa. I assume this is football. 63 to 62. Iowa's number 30. Who's number 30? That's not. No, it's not DeGene. I thought he was. No, he's something else. Intercepted a pass with 1 minute to go and sealed the win. The universe exploded. I was jolted awake. Oh my God. Comment of the year right there? Maybe. You know, the universe would explode just in general. I'm not talking about your dreams. I'm talking about reality. The universe would explode in a 63-62 game. 63 points for Iowa? Things are going to go up in flames. But what an Iowa way to finish a game. Sealing it with an interception. Sealing the deal with a takeaway. I love it. I love it. Tim saying the Pac-12 will hang in there. It's very difficult to kill a conference. I don't know if I've said that before, but I've thought it before. It's very difficult. Like, the Big East still exists. Remember when the ACC and everybody just raided the Big East? It still exists as a basketball league. It's a pretty strong basketball league. It's got a TV deal with Fox on the basketball side of things. So they've been able to survive the Big East as time has gone on, as time has progressed. So the Pac-12, it might survive, but it's not going to be the conference it was before. You got to think maybe a merger with the Mountain West, or maybe they go out and raid the Mountain West kind of a thing. Mountain West is sitting in an interesting spot. They've got a deal with CBS Sports Network. They got a couple of games on big CBS as well. Like, the Mountain West is sitting in an interesting spot. I don't know how Stanford and Cal would feel about going to the Mountain West. Do they think they're above that or whatever? I don't know. But the Mountain West, Washington State, Oregon State, Stanford and Cal, they had those teams in the Pac-12 disintegrates. They could be one of the better G5 leagues out there. They could be. It depends if teams want to go that route and schools want to go that route, and all of that. Dallas Schwartz chiming in a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about trophy games. The Spear of Greece, the Spear of Troy, Sparty, Michigan State, and USC Spartans Trojans. Obvious. Purdue and USC in the Apollo Bowl. This is interesting. Interesting information. Neil Armstrong, Bachelor of Science from Purdue, and a Master's from USC. That's good. I love the connections that Dallas is making here. I love the history that is being connected here as well. Love the history over there. Erica comes in talking about the last time the universe exploded. They did get, man, I remember watching that game, Iowa and Maryland a few years back, where interception after interception after interception, turnover after turnover after turnover. Yes, I do remember that game, and they did score a bunch of points that time. David Floyd coming aboard. If the Big Ten invites Cal and Stanford, the conference will lose a boatload of money. It will cost, I think, it could cost teams a lot of money. That's what we talked about in segment 1 of the program here tonight. We just don't know if them together, if the networks would be willing to really pay up for Cal and Stanford together. Cal and Stanford together. Really good show tonight. Really good perspective from a lot of different people here tonight. And I very much appreciate everybody for stopping by here for Big Ten Ted Live tonight. Here's what's coming up on the channel this week. Coming up on tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about should the SEC and the Big Ten work together to separate themselves from the rest of the country. 7 a.m. tomorrow, that will be dropping an uploaded video. On Friday, we're going to be talking about Big Ten contraction. Could it happen? Could that increase the payout to some of these schools down the road? Joel Klatt talked about it on his show. I'm going to give my take over there on Friday. So thanks, everybody, for jumping on board on the live stream here tonight. TBD whether we're going to be back on Tuesday or Wednesday. Work schedule. Got to work them things out for the live show coming up next week. Also want to quickly mention here that this year, during football season, we will be doing a Sunday night live stream to kind of go over a lot of the games. I won't probably be doing as many reaction videos on Saturdays, maybe as much as in the past. I'm going to be doing a lot of the big games, but we're going to be talking about a lot of the games, almost all of the games from the day before, Saturday and the weekend before. We're going to be talking about that on Sunday on a live shows this fall, the Big Ten Sunday Sound Off right here on the Big Ten TED YouTube channel. So you can check that out. Really excited. So I can cover and I can talk about all of these games that have gone on without doing all the reaction videos as well. Although really excited for that. Really excited coming together each Sunday. David Floyd talking about Cal and Stanford can't fill their stadiums. It's like adding Rutgers and Maryland, all that. David, you must have joined here. We had a big-time boiler in the comments here earlier on, a Purdue fan. He kind of said the same thing. It's like Rutgers and Maryland, take 2. Rutgers and Maryland, take 2. Jared loving Maryland in the Big Ten. I think Maryland's solid for the Big Ten. Rutgers, I think it was added for its market and obviously not necessarily its athletic prowess. Getting them into New York City, it was at the time getting cable subscribers to the Big Ten Network. Of course, cable isn't as big of a deal anymore. So where does Rutgers stand right now? I think that is up in the air as well. Well, we are past the 2-hour point, and it is time to hang it up because it is time to go to bed. So really appreciate everybody for joining me on the live stream here tonight. Been a lot of fun. I'll keep you posted on Twitter, keep you posted on YouTube about what's coming up, possibly a Wednesday night live stream coming up. But, these last couple of weeks are going to be busy. It's going to be hectic for me, so I'll try to keep it on Wednesdays as best I can. But once we get in to mid to late June, that's when things are probably going to be a little bit more consistent and things are going to clear up scheduling-wise. Got 2 videos coming out on Thursday, coming out on Friday. Big movement here coming up, ladies and gentlemen. So pay attention. We've got stuff coming down the pike. Really appreciate everybody for coming aboard on the live stream tonight. So until next time, I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.